Claire, are you there?
Yeah, hi everyone. I was just waiting for a few more of the participants to come through because I know it takes a little while once we open the room, but I think it's 6:01, so we can start the event now. So hi everyone, thanks for joining us this evening. I'm Claire, and I'm the outgoing events coordinator for the Friends of Nuclear Energy Network, and also the sponsorship and sales lead for the Nuclear Institute Young Generation Network. So I'm going to be chairing today's event, and we'll be hearing from a range of speakers who are all involved in youth climate action in different ways. The aim of this event is to highlight some of the great climate advocacy initiatives that have been taking place this year, and also provide you all with an insight into what youth climate action can look like and different ways that you can get involved. So for the first part of the event today, we will be hearing from 6 different speakers, and they will all be sharing how they're involved in youth climate action and their different initiatives. This is a few more speakers than we usually have at these types of events, so we're going to do relatively quick fire presentations this evening. And then in the second part of the event, we will have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions throughout, please do put them in the Q&A box, and we will do our best to get to as many of them as possible at the end of the event. So I will hand over now to our first speaker of the evening. So we have Jack Raven, who is part of the Friends of Nuclear Energy Network and was actually involved in founding the network. So I will hand over to you, Jack, to tell us a little bit more about the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Claire. So yeah, as Claire said, I'm one of the founders of PHONE, but also this current secretary on the current committee. We started the organisation just towards the end of 2019, so just over well, coming up to our second year, end of our second year now, which is really good. And for those that don't know, Friends of Nuclear Energy, we obviously support nuclear energy and know that it plays a fundamental role in tackling climate change, and that's obviously what we're all here about to hear today. Essentially, what we want to do is our youth climate action is to make more people aware of all the benefits that we think nuclear power provides. So, you know, aside from the best thing of nuclear power being its environmental performance, there's a really strong host of other benefits that we think is really strong messaging that we want to provide. So, you know, all about all the ESG boxes, as you might call them, social and governance. It's a safe career, a long career, lots of jobs and skills and investment in nations and in regions. So that's what Friends of Nuclear Energy really want to. That's our strong messaging that we want to get through. You'd think the kind of list that I've just gone through there, you'd think it'd be really easy supporting nuclear energy, but sadly we're kind of paddling back a little bit against some negative public opinion and also actually some apathy towards nuclear power. I think you'd probably be surprised about how many people don't really know that nuclear energy makes up between 15 and 20% of our electricity mix currently. So what we try and do as Friends of Nuclear Energy, our kind of USP, as it were, is to try and access those audiences who maybe haven't heard our messages before about nuclear power, who maybe you know, they know what the energy market is, they haven't really ever tried to interact with it. Maybe there's an interest in climate or climate change, and you know, we really want to kind of feed into that and just put nuclear at the forefront of the narrative, hopefully, and really make it clear to people that there's a strong environmental performance, and as I said, all those other kind of clear ESG benefits to what a nuclear project in the nuclear sector does. We kind of recognize when we set up PHONE that there can be a little bit of a nuclear bubble where you tend to talk to a lot of people who all think nuclear power is great, which is really positive, but you're probably generally speaking to people who either work in the nuclear industry or who are already sold on your messaging. So it's that real challenge that we're trying to overcome, and getting new people interested and you know, access new areas, and that's why you know, some of the work that we do is really on really clear, concise social media messaging. We're across all of the social media channels and try and create content that is kind of relevant and topical, following sort of trends in the news, and also we try and create events which you know, obviously contributing with this event today is fantastic, and there's a really good panel of speakers, and we do other events like accessing at universities, and again, when we do that, it's you know, there's not a kind of it's not necessarily the nuclear engineering course we're going to speak to. It might be the Energy Society or you know, Engineering Society, something like that. So we try and access those groups that maybe kind of begin thinking about energy topics and climate change, but aren't necessarily within the nuclear sector, or maybe haven't tried to engage with it yet. So that's one of the main things that we do. As I said, one of the things about nuclear power, it can be just how secretive and maybe how complicated it can be. So when I talked about the social media side of things, and please do have a look at our channels, we really try and distill down the messaging to some key points, and to get away from the jargon side of things, which you can easily slip into. We definitely encourage people to kind of look at the facts and make their own minds up. We're not kind of overly preachy in terms of our goals, and we want people to challenge misconceptions when they're seen. So obviously there's a lot of social media can be a dangerous place at times, so we don't encourage anyone to step out of their comfort zone. But when there's opportunities to have a conversation with someone on a misconception, I think it's a really important thing to do, and it's something that we're really positive about within Phone. So COP26 is obviously one of the main reasons why we're here today. It's on our very soon now. We're less than 2 weeks away, which is great. So it's something where we're going to have to be really keen on our messaging to make sure that we're still part of that really big movement, which is online and obviously physically in Glasgow. It's something where we want to take our messaging around what our opinions and thoughts are towards nuclear power are, and get them to that wider audience. So a little bit just on our current campaigns. Obviously, one of the things we want to do is align to Sustainable Development Goals and align nuclear power to that. It's sustainable, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, for people that don't know them. There's it's a list which it cuts across all sectors really of aspects of sustainability, and nuclear does tick a lot of the boxes. So look about clean energy, of course, is the key one, but then there's land use and marine impacts, jobs and skills, and education, poverty, and there's a lot of things which you can kind of make links to. We've recently, you'll hear from Richard in a minute. Richard is also part of Phone, and we recently supported the Stand Up for Nuclear event in the UK, which was really successful, and obviously Richard will talk more about that in a moment's time. In terms of getting more people involved, I think really easy with Phone. You can get involved with our social media channels. You can follow us. Please do promote our content. Message us with questions and communicate with us. We're really open for that. And a little mini plug, I suppose, we do mix up our committee annually. So towards the end of this year, we'll be looking to kind of get a few new recruits on board as well. So, but I'll leave you with that because I've probably used up my time limit there, Claire.
No, that's brilliant. Thanks, Jack. And I might be a little bit biased, but I think there's been loads of great work from the Friends of Nuclear Energy group this year, and some really engaging content out on the social media channels that people can go and have a look at. So next up, we're going to hear from Richard Arlington. And sticking with the nuclear theme, Richard is part of Stand Up for Nuclear, which is a campaign, and he recently organised a very successful event here in London. So over to you, Richard.
Hi all. So yeah, as Jack mentioned, I am part of Friends of Nuclear Energy, but also helped with the Stand Up for Nuclear campaign in the UK. So a bit of background about what Stand Up for Nuclear is. It's a global advocacy movement, and it has advocacy events across 30 countries in the world, all in sort of the month of September. And events range in size, so you can be sort of a single person in South Korea with a plaque, all the way up to 500 people in Brussels, campaigning with sort of speakers and media invited and politicians invited. So the real range in how much each Stand Up for Nuclear advocate, how much effort they put into their country's event. Friends of Nuclear Energy helped organise the London event, which was focused on nuclear ESG sales pitch. So we can move on to the next slide. So here, given that the UK and specifically London is a financial capital of the world, we thought that we would target our Stand Up for Nuclear event appropriately. So we targeted the banking sector, especially in London, and targeted the inclusion of nuclear within ESGs. So to give background, ESG is a set of investment vehicle directed towards sociably good causes. And within the environmental bracket is a lot of investments that go into energy. So 300 billion gets invested into green energy a year. And of that, 80% goes towards wind and solar, but only 5% goes to nuclear. So there's a huge imbalance in the amount of investment that goes into nuclear, given that nuclear generates a similar amount of energy as wind and solar. So that's what we were targeting, and we made a sales pitch in the format that a banker would want to read to be convinced of the arguments on why to include nuclear within their ESG funds. So we dispelled various myths that they might have held, which were stopping its inclusion, and then advocated the opportunities both to society and also to the investment funds, so the financial opportunities of including nuclear. So this sales pitch was made, and 3 different means were used to sort of get the message to the relevant parties, to bankers. So we can move on to the next slide. So first up, we did in-person leafleting. So here we went to Bank Station in London, appropriately named because there's the headquarters of hundreds of banks within sort of a few hundred meters of it. And on people's commutes, we were handing out these leaflets to them, targeting it specifically those dressed in suits, those who were more likely to be bankers, more likely to be receptive to the message. And what was really pleasing to see is, firstly, those who were in suits were more likely to want to reach out for our leaflet. They were sort of drawn in by the words nuclear in ESG. And the conversations we did have with them were very encouraging. There was one person from JP Morgan who said he was a big fan of the sales pitch, and that he would send the PDF copy of the sales pitch to the rest of his colleagues. So that was very encouraging. Second means by which we got this message out was by social media. So there was 5 posts on Friends of Nuclear Energy's social media on Instagram, 2 posts on their LinkedIn, and then we also tracked the traffic through the QR code on the sales pitch to see what proportion of people who read the sales pitch scanned the QR code to find out more. And it was great to see when tracking these metrics that social media engagement on Instagram and LinkedIn were twice what past posts had been. So there was clearly interest in this ESG sales pitch. And then also there was a good amount of click-through rate of people that read the sales pitch and wanted to find out the data that backed it, or find the actual PDF to send on to others. The third and final way that we marketed the event was what I like to call direct to desk marketing. So instead of leafleting, which has a sort of potentially a low hit rate of actually hitting, getting read by people of importance, here there's direct to desk marketing. We paid for postage and packaging to send 1,000 copies of the sales pitch to management across 200 different banks and ESG funds, as well as news outlets and political government institutions. So sent out those 1,000 pitches, and yeah, that was done recently. So still waiting, likely waiting for them to receive it, but very excited to hear the feedback that we get from them. There was actually a 4th way that we marketed it. Just the other day on Monday, did a nuclear ESG sales pitch presentation to students at the London School of Economics, looking to get sort of that youth involvement in nuclear, and also to hear what their views were on it. And again, it was very encouraging hearing what they had to say. A few people before the presentation had expressed their skepticism of the nuclear on the basis of cost or safety, but by the end of the presentation had been sort of they've had their mind changed, and that was really encouraging to hear. It's also great to hear the questions that they had and the interest that they had in nuclear energy. That's all for me, Claire.
Brilliant, thanks, Richard. And I think it's really great to hear about two slightly different approaches to nuclear advocacy and how the two can work together. So on the one hand, you've got Stand Up for Nuclear, which was a very targeted, specific campaign, and that works really well alongside things like the Friends of Nuclear Energy social media channels that have that broader reach and focus more on how can we, in general, communicate and change perception around nuclear. So perfect, thank you, Richard. Up next, we've got Catherine Hunter. Catherine's part of the Energy UK Young Energy Professionals Committee, and she's going to talk to us about a recent report that the group have developed and a lot of the work that they've been doing around net zero and COP. So I'll hand over to you now, Catherine.
Thanks, Claire, and apologies if there's background noise. The office bar is open, so I'm missing out on my Prosecco, so apologies if you can hear too much behind me, but I don't think it should be too rowdy, seeing as the bar just opened. I'm really excited to be here today and talk to you about some of the work the YET Forum has been doing around COP26, but I thought it'd be useful just to introduce myself first. So I'm an account manager at Aspectus Group, which is a global integrated communications agency with a team of energy specialists. In essence, our role is to help our clients to elevate their brand's profile through a mix of traditional PR, social media, and SEO. Alongside this, as Claire mentions, I sit on the steering committee of the YET Forum. The YET Forum is a network to promote the latest generation of energy industry professionals, providing opportunities to collaborate, develop, and recognise successes. We now have over 2,000 individual members representing over 350 different organisations. The forum runs events for members throughout the year, including panel discussions where industry experts discuss topical issues, interviews with senior leaders, networking sessions, site visits, and social events. Also, once a year, we host the annual YEP Awards ceremony to recognise the successes and achievements of young professionals in the energy industry. Tickets are currently on sale for the awards, which will be taking place this year on the 5th of November, so do check out our website and social media channels for those. But this year, with COP coming to the UK, we are inspired to take our work one step further. To do this, we consulted young energy professionals in the industry in order to give all stakeholders a chance to input into the discussion regarding net zero strategy. As part of our report, we issued a survey with specific questions about the UK's net zero ambition, inspired by the COP26 themes. The recommendations that have emerged from this report showcase the value of young professional voices in the industry and provide an opportunity for future leaders to reverse mentor current leaders. With representation across the whole energy sector value chains, this report encompasses the diversity of thought of young professionals in the industry. The report highlights the level of confidence YEPs have in the government's plans to reach 2050 targets, how the UK's net zero strategies fare compared to other countries around the world, and also on ideas on how to incentivise climate-friendly behaviour and talk about how much of a role YEPs both feel themselves and their organisations are playing in the net zero transition. Key findings from the report are structured around the themes of COP26. I'm sure you don't need me to remind you, but they are mitigation, adaptation, finance, and collaboration. We've also added an additional section called Looking Ahead, which highlights the broader views of young professionals in the energy sector and our place within it. But before I dive into some of the headline stats and give you a sneak peek of the report before we launch it at our awards, I wanted to give a massive shout out to Yemen, who should have been speaking to you tonight, as she has done tremendous work pulling together the feedback from the steering committee and leading on the writing of the report. We asked YEPs which tools they think should be used to deliver significant investment that is needed to support the UK's transition to net zero. Some innovative ideas that came from the report include linking mortgages to low carbon heating, competitions and incubators for new technology, an emphasis in the education system on sustainability to shift our culture away from a hustle economy and a climate-free and dividend model. And what's great about these ideas is when we were taking them to the Energy UK board, they agreed with us. We're not going to solve these problems if we don't bring the public along with us, so the education point, especially to children, shouldn't be underestimated. But our work doesn't just involve the public, it also involves those working in the sector. And these great ideas shouldn't be kept up conversations either. But 43% of YEPs said that there were not enough opportunities to engage with their company's net zero strategy, or that they did not know of these opportunities. They also rated having a positive commitment to net zero and being able to make a difference in an organisation as important factors in applying to or leaving a company. There are some comments that really stood out to us. These include, there seems to be an experience checklist for net zero engagement. There is an elite club of net zero in some companies. That such schemes at the strategic level where young engineers are not, which is a massive shame. Ultimately, young professionals of today will be delivering these plans in 2050. So having our voices at the table can only make sense. And while we might not be the experts on drafting strategic documents or understand all the shareholder pressure some stakeholders feel, we are curious enough to ask the right questions and challenge thinking that can add real value, as proven with some of the things our report is saying. So with the report's launch just weeks away, we are urging industry leaders to listen to the ideas of tomorrow's leaders today. I don't want to give you too many insights from our report, so I think I'll leave it there. But there are some great insights coming on the 5th of November.
Thanks, Catherine. And what a huge piece of work as well, and good that it was so positively received. If you're able to provide a link or something for people to be able to access that in the chat, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, so it launched on the 5th of November, so keep an eye out on our social media channels to see it.
Great. So we're now going to hear from Neil Calder from the Young Generation COP26 Delivery Group. So Neil has had a very busy year doing a huge amount of work on climate advocacy in the run-up to COP. So I'm excited to hear more from you, Neil, on the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign and a lot of the work that YGN have been doing in the lead up to COP, which is now just around the corner.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Claire, and thanks to everyone else for joining us tonight. So as Claire said, I'm here to talk about the NIYGN, which is the youth branch of the UK's professional nuclear body. So the NIYGN are focused on encouraging, developing and engaging the UK's young nuclear workforce to help shape the future of the nuclear sector. But the NIYGN also strives to collaborate with other like-minded groups and initiatives who are promoting clean energy, like all of these amazing folk who are speaking at the webinar today as well. So there's a wide international network of YGNs around the world, but as the host nation for this year's climate conference, the UK's NIYGN are tasked with coordinating our collective COP26 efforts in collaboration with the European Nuclear Society, the ENS. So that's what we've been doing. So back in late 2020, the NIYGN set up a dedicated COP26 team to begin planning for the event. And since then, myself and a group of 6 others have been hard at work on a range of different fronts. So we set out, first of all, to define our vision, which is for a clean, sustainable and abundant low carbon future for all, as well as our mission, which is to accelerate the ability of the world to achieve net zero by 2050 by driving collaboration between nuclear and renewable technology. So aside from planning to make a big impact at COP26 in November, we wanted to generate some real momentum in the build-up to the event. So we launched our Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign at the start of this year with the aim of raising nuclear's profile ahead of COP26 and really inspiring and informing people across the globe on exactly why net zero needs nuclear. So the campaign itself, the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign, has been built around 2 things. So there's our position paper, which is kind of our scientific justification behind the claim that net zero needs nuclear, and also acts as a kind of tangible document to actually present to policymakers at COP26. And then we have our call to action, which is essentially a petition. And we saw this as being a real crucial means of gathering the support and being able to add credibility to our campaign by showing the level of support that we've got. And we're just shy of 5,000 signatures to date. So we're looking to really push that ahead as we go towards COP26. Yeah, so since launching the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign, it's gone from strength to strength. And under the Net Zero Needs Nuclear banner, we've been involved in a wide range of different activities. So lots of webinars, we've attended conferences, we've spoken on podcasts, We've been involved in STEM outreach, school speaking competition. We've been canvassing and meeting with MPs and sending letters to international decision makers. And we even met with the IAEA Director General as well. So, we've been really building up a head of steam ahead of COP26, which is obviously just around the corner. So yeah, obviously COP26 is approaching. So now we're kind of firmly focused on taking the campaign to COP26. So at COP26, we're going to be lobbying delegates and decision makers in the UN controlled blue zone, whilst also just advocating for nuclear generally throughout, including in the green zone, as well as taking things to the the tough streets of Glasgow. So as you can see from the slide that's up there, there's plenty of ways to get involved in the campaign. I'd say visit our website where you can see the position paper and you can get access to our call to action and some information about our social media campaign. But I think most of all, I think the thing to say is if you're keen to get involved, the best thing you can do is really just talk to people. Much like what Jack said in the initial talk tonight, trying to break that industry bubble is really important. I think just talking to your friends, talking to your family, talking to your workmates, that's actually the key, we think. I think perhaps some people on this call will have seen this YouGov poll that was released just recently, which showed that less than half of UK citizens believe that nuclear is low carbon. And that's fundamental to our campaign that net zero needs nuclear. So, we've still got a lot of work to do to try and spread that awareness and understanding. And that's everything from me so far.
Thanks, Neil. That's great. And I think the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign and a lot of the work that YGN have done in the run-up to COP is a really clear example in a way of how a youth-led or young professionals-led campaign can really cut through and has been really successful in creating some clear messaging around COP. I also think on the YouGov poll, it also did show that 2/3 of people do agree that nuclear can play a key part in reaching net zero. And so that's a really positive thing, actually. And I think often there are, a smaller, louder, perhaps, number of people who have different views on nuclear. And so having something that really promotes and makes nuclear more attractive can really help promote its case and bring people along on that journey and join in on the advocacy work that happens. So I will hand over now to our fifth speaker. So we're going to be hearing from Sinead, who is the chair of the London and Home Counties Energy Institute Young Professionals Network. And she's also been appointed as the Young Professionals representative on the Energy Institute Council. So I'm sure there'll be loads of work that you're able to share with us, Sinead.
Thanks a lot, Claire, and hi everyone. So yes, as Claire said, I chair the Energy Institute's Young Professional Council, and I'm very delighted and honoured today to be speaking on behalf of our vast young professionals network internationally. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the Energy Institute, the EI is a professional body for the energy industry, completely sector-wide, so ranging from oil and gas to wind to hydrogen, and hopefully some increasing nuclear representation soon. And what it does is it develops and shares knowledge primarily, but it's also promoting skills and good practice towards a safe and sustainable energy system. So the EI has over 10,000 members internationally, as well as about 200 company members worldwide. Now, the Young Professionals Council is a collective of 15 international and regional branches. And what we do is we engage in topical issues across the sector, and we're continuously expanding the professional network to benefit the development and the careers of our members. So our initiative, Generation 2050, as you can see on screen, is really about identifying that between now and 2050, many of us that are young professionals or students will be in leadership positions in the industry by then, if we're not already. And this will be the year where we'll ask, what did we achieve? When we set those, we would set a part of the discussion, setting those climate targets in 2021. And the young generation at that time will look at us and say, well, this is where our climate is, this is where industries are, and they'll look to us and they'll judge us on how governments and big corporations have responded to the climate crisis. So our Generation 2050 initiative is a collective that's been put together by a young professional network internationally, but also some partner companies, including Neptune, IBM, Ørsted, Vattenfall, Repsol, Sinopec, to name some of them, and the EI, of course, to really promote and provide a platform for young professionals around the world so that they have a voice in these big debates about climate, access to energy, but also energy security as well. And within this program, we kicked it off with a mass global survey where we had 1,000 respondents who provided their views on various questions, such as the future of skills to help meet climate goals, also the kind of actions we'd like to see from governments, universal access to energy, kind of the full spectrum. And on the back of this survey, we produced a manifesto where we've summarized the results, but also our key asks to governments as well. Also, as part of the program, we've had quite a busy year. And in 2020, we had an event as part of New York Climate Week, where we hosted young professional founders and leaders working in things like blockchain technology for energy trading to solar panels in Africa. And that conversation was really about empowering young professionals to kind of step forward with their ideas and really to just be kind of a piece of inspiration for our generation as we're really in this important time in transition. Other things that we've done, we've had loads of roundtables from our branches internationally. So the Middle East has hosted an event on how to kind of deliver net zero in that region. Also the Asia Pacific has hosted a roundtable on what is kind of the biggest climate conundrum for that region. And even this morning, both of our Nigeria and London branches hosted an event together on how does foreign energy investment help or hinder SDGs in the global south. So we're really tapping into these big questions and these big discussions. And it's really important about raising awareness within our energy community and helping people realize that they do have a voice, and especially inviting kind of some politicians and some kind of leaders in these big corporations in these discussions to kind of sit in a room and I think every small voice and every question that's put towards them kind of helps build that strategy in kind of achieving net zero. So in summary, our purpose is to really highlight to politicians and our corporate leaders that we already have a cohort of young professionals that have the expertise to help meet the climate crisis. But also to add that not only do we have these expertise now, but we're incredibly motivated as this is something that we have to experience and it's an intergenerational emergency that needs to be dealt with. So in terms of looking forward, we have a really exciting short film that's going to be launched during COP. So our Aberdeen Young Professionals Network traveled around different sites in the region, and they will be hosting at Scottish Power their film where they've been looking at the energy landscape in the Scotland region and looking at different technologies from biomass to CCS, but also closing off with their thoughts and their asks to governments and leaders during COP as well. So that's my very quick summary of our Generation 2050 project. But if you agree and you think it's important that today's leaders do listen to future leaders, i.e. ourselves, then you can get involved by emailing info@energyinst.org, also following Energy Institute socials on LinkedIn, Instagram or Twitter as well. And I will drop a link on the Generation 2050 landing page where you can read the manifesto in your own time.
Brilliant, thanks Sinead. And I think it's, really clear how huge the network of young professionals that are involved in the Energy Institute and are able to contribute to this platform are. And I'm sure lots of people on this call, if they haven't already, will be interested in seeing this and getting involved as well. So thank you for that. Our final speaker now is Kilo Uchendu, and he is the campaign coordinator for Mock COP. So this is a really fantastic initiative, again, centering young people and young professionals in the conversation around climate change and particularly COP. So I'll hand over now to Kilo. If you're there, you might need to turn your camera on.
All right, yeah. All right.
Perfect.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Good evening. My name is Gelu, and I'm one of the campaign coordinators for COP26. So COP26 is a youth-led conversation that resulted from the postponement of COP26 last year. So we decided to fill the void created by the postponement of COP26. So we decided to bring young people together to continue the climate conversation. So that was how it started. And within the space, we run a 2-week conference that replicated the actual COP, but it was read, and delivered by young people. And at the end of the conference, we came up with 18 ambitious policy acts demanding actions from world leaders on social and climate justice. That's all about the phase 1 of the conference. We had about 340 delegates from around 140 countries who represented their countries, their respective countries, to voice how they feel the world should tackle climate change. And then we had 6 main key themes that we think that is very crucial or important if we are to win the war against climate change. One of the things was climate education. We believe that education or climate literacy will lead to climate action. So one of our key focus was climate education. Then we have resilient livelihood. We have health and mental well-being, and then green jobs. I know some of my colleagues have talked before. Stressed more on energy and energy from coal to nuclear energy. So we also think about green jobs, because if we are to solve these things, we need low carbon transition. And low carbon transition means that people should be able to get into work that are low carbon intent. And nuclear energy is definitely one of them. I studied mechanical engineering, so I took some curriculum courses on some coursework on nuclear energy and nuclear energy systems. So then after the conference, we now have another big challenge. We have 18 policies that are ambitious, that are realistic, but it's just a policy document. So we needed to get as many countries as possible, to adopt this treaty. And that was when we came up with the second phase of the project. And we initially had a goal to get at least 30 countries to adopt or implement one of those treaties in the run-up of COP26. So we started lobbying in different countries where they have delegates, and then we have recorded some considerable success. In Nigeria, I'm currently joining the call from Nigeria, and in Nigeria, our lobbying was so intense that we get the Nigerian National Assembly to pass a bill, a climate change bill, and the climate change bill captures 2 of our core treaty acts. The bill was recently passed and it has been forwarded to the president for the presidential assent. And then we also have some success in countries like Tonga, Finland, and UK. And then just last month, because we have the key focus on climate education, we want young people, because most of the young people demanded that they want to learn about climate change, not just learning about climate change. They want to learn about the solutions to climate change. They want to learn about their connection to nature. And most importantly, they want to be able to gain the skills, the knowledge that will help them adapt in the face of the face of a changing climate. Because it's no longer news. The climate crisis is upon us, and people need to learn about this, not just learn about it, learn about their connections, how they are contributing to this, and how they can help profile solutions. So that was one of the also what measure this thing. So we launched the Teach the Teacher campaign because there was a survey carried out in UK, and we discovered that 70% of teachers, said, that they have not received adequate training, to enable them to talk about climate change in the classroom, or to transmit climate change in the classroom. So we started the campaign to mobilize support, to mobilize funding for government to reskill teachers, to reskill teachers for teachers to be able to talk that thing. Another major success is that we were able to, pull up a partnership with the UK Department for Education, and then the Italian government and UNESCO, and we'll be running an official event called the Joint Ministerial event, Climate and Environmental Ministers and Education Ministers event in COP26 is one of the official program in the Blue Zone on Youth and Public Empowerment Day. So what we want to achieve with this is bringing key stakeholders and promoting cross-sectoral collaborations, between education ministers and environmental ministers. We want to bring them together to, start, collaborating and developing solutions to provide climate education or education, for sustainability to students, of all school children, regardless of how they are schooled. And one of other things we stress very well is the need for this education to be age specific, to be region specific, because we understand that different regions have different needs, so there is need for the education to be age specific and region specific, and also so these are some of the things that we've been able to do. So, and I'm looking, I'm already very motivated from some of the works I've seen here, and I'm also very confident with the work young people are doing around the world. And generally, young people give me hope, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the conversations. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kilo. It's great to have you here. And I think the mock COP campaign has been hugely successful. And it's a really good example of a campaign that is taking that really global outlook and getting people interested in climate youth advocacy involved across all different countries. So we'll now move through to the Q&A section of the event. So if everyone wants to turn their cameras on. And if anyone in the audience does have any questions for our panelists, please do just pop them in the chat and we can answer them now. So I think the first question, I'll come to Neil and Kilo, although of course anyone else on the panel who wants to answer, you're very welcome to. But this one's around COP26 and how important do you think this conference is in the fight against climate change? And also, given that both of you are doing work that is specifically targeted at COP, how are you looking, or are you looking to take that forward after the conference? So Neil, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, okay, I'll jump in then. So yeah, obviously, I mean, I think we're all aware here that COP26 is hugely important, but it's significantly important because it comes 5 years after COP21, or actually 6 years because of the delay, but 5 years on from the signing of the Paris Agreement, or 5 COPs on from there. And there's a ratcheting mechanism within that was set out in the Paris Agreement that says that basically new ambitions should be set every 5 years. So this is a really kind of, significant COP from that perspective. But I mean, obviously, we're becoming more aware as a global population of the imminent crisis, and with net zero now being a kind of focus. And being like a legally binding target within many nations and many, many more to come, it really just kind of amplifies how significant this COP is in particular. As I said, there was even just this 1 year delay from the, due to COVID reasons from last year. That's a serious impact because we've got such a little amount of time to do what we need to do before 2050. So even just that extra year ramps up the scale of what's required. So it's just super important that we basically make sure that an actual step change is enacted following COP26 this year.
Great, thanks, Neil. And perhaps I'll ask my sort of second part of the question to you now as well, and then I can come to Kilo afterwards. But the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign and the work that the YGN have done around COP, how do you see that carrying on following the conference?
Yeah, so if I'm being honest, we've been so heavily focused on COP26 that it's quite hard to think about life after COP26. But no, obviously, I mean, this is just the beginning, isn't it? This is just, you know, everything that comes after COP26 is so important that we keep the momentum going and we go full steam ahead. And that is very much the plan for the Net Zero Needs Nuclear campaign. Maybe we'll take a day or two to take a breath, but yeah, no, we're going to go from strength to strength with the campaign, hopefully raise its profile. And I'd honestly like to see that, you know, we've got all these organizations, these initiatives that have gained, you know, traction, but I'd like to see more off the back of this and see more engagement from the public. So we're definitely going to keep doing our part, and hopefully there'll be lots and lots of others too that will come and join.
Great. And I suppose it's a little bit of a tricky question to answer as well, because it will depend somewhat on the outcomes of COP and how we react to those and take those forward as well. So thanks, Neil. And Kilo, I'll come to you now to get your views on, I guess, the importance of COP and the role that mock COP has played in really bringing youth voices forward and the sort of impact and that you think that's had.
Yeah, I think Neil said one important role, and that is that COP26 is a very crucial year or a very crucial conference because the Paris Climate Agreement, which I think for up till now is still considered as the holy grail of climate action, is meant to be reviewed every 5 years, and this is COP26 was meant to be the 5th year, but they postponed it. So this is actually the very, very crucial year to review the progress made, review the Paris promise, and see how to step up ambition. Is it working, or are there any other things? But also there are other topics. There are other topics of the Paris Climate Agreement that needs to be negotiated and finalized upon. One of them is the Article 6. So I think COP26 is a very crucial year, and we're hoping that it turns out to be, you know, as ambitious as we're looking for it to be. There are a lot of things we want to see happen there. There are a lot of things commitment we want to see, parties to make, or the negotiation things to make or agree upon. And one of them is on finance. You know, I've already said this before. The war against climate change will be fought and won in developing countries, not in United States, not in Europe, because these are the countries that are still developing. They need access to technology. And development takes a lot of emissions. If you look at richer countries, most of them have peaked their emissions, and over the years, their emission is reducing. While for developing countries, it's reverse. The emission is still peaking. So if an S1 countries or richer countries do not commit the $100 billion per year agreed on climate finance, developing countries have no options. If you look at most of the NDCs from developing countries, or most of their pledges, they have a conditional pledges, unconditional pledges on this, and then conditional on this. For Nigeria, for example, they said they will reduce emissions by 20% in 2030, unconditionally, or conditionally by 47%. And the condition is that they have enough finance and support and technology transfer. So it's very important, and that's also one of the things we're looking, you know, that should be agreed on in COP. And then looking at how more COP can, you know, be able to amplify young people voices in the run-up in COP26 itself. You know, that has been one of the very things we've been working at, one of the backgrounds. At the moment, the Youth Public Empowerment Day is one of the spaces that MOCOP have very good average on. We have some very close relationship with, you know, with the COP26 team and the UK Cabinet Office, and trying to influence the outcome. But also we have young people in the blue zone who have some 8day.org, for example, for instance, have given us permission to use their pavilion. So we have young people inside the blue zone actively lobbying their negotiators, the NIC negotiators from their countries, to influence the outcome And that is, one very important thing. So it's very important that young people lead the way, because that is what I've been seeing, young people to step up to leadership. So we have young people inside the blue zone actively lobbying and trying to influence their with negotiators and different parties to try to influence what happens in the negotiation. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's fantastic. Thank you. So moving sort of on from COP now, this webinar is a really good example of lots of different groups all involved in advocacy and collaboration towards net zero coming together. So my question really is, how important is this type of collaboration for achieving net zero? And how are some of the initiatives that we've discussed really supporting that collaboration? So I think perhaps Sinead, I'll come to you on this one first. As your work is really looking at bringing together different groups of people and young professionals from the energy industry on this one platform.
Yeah, thanks, Claire. I think that's a really good point, and I get the hard question, but I think that you can look at it in two ways. So the Energy Institute is sector-wide, which is great, but even though we're all in the energy sector from different parts, I think, like as Jack was saying, I think it was Jack, your point, that we do talk to each other. But I think that the great thing about youth advocacy is that we're better at speaking to the public through social media, and we're better at kind of using that as a tool. And I kind of see snippets that, in all of these initiatives, social media has clearly been quite powerful, as well as kind of bridging that intergenerational gap. So I think at least from like a Generation 2050 perspective, so far, a lot of our work has been about knowledge sharing and more about highlighting ourselves as a group of young professionals that do actually understand the energy system. That said, I do fear that a lot of organizations and governments might see youth initiatives as little CSR projects. For instance, the fantastic Milan pre-COP discussions, where you had 400 youth delegates go all the way to Milan to talk about actual solutions. And the big headline was Greta Thunberg saying blah, blah, blah. And we didn't hear anything from anyone else who've traveled really far and worked really hard to think about solutions. So yes, it's been great to not share that gap and to improve kind of public awareness. But I think there's still a lot more to do, especially post-COP, because we need to make sure that kind of the right discussions are still being heard outside of us who are all very familiar with the issues.
Just to jump in there, we have got a section in our net zero report on collaboration, but looking at government and how we collaborate with finance and buildings and the kind of heat sector, which all feed into net zero but can be quite siloed. And interestingly, we said that, or the YEPS report found that access to finance was quite a challenging area. It didn't seem like it was working quite as well. But one member of the Energy UK board did say that for big projects, finance is much easier. It's actually helping the individual consumer to access that finance. So there's, even within sectors, challenges of who's getting where and how. So I think the collaboration point is super important, but it's not an easy one to solve by any stretch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I don't know, I think both sort of Jack and Richard have touched on in their work and in their presentations, the role of finance and the importance of creating these sort of ESG standards that will channel private finance into the right areas to support the net zero transition. So that's clearly a key area that goes across all of the different technologies that we need, and probably a point where actually it would make sense for the different industries to come together and collaborate on that. To create something that would work for everyone. Great, so we've just got 5 minutes left, and I've got a final question I wanted to close the event on and pose to each of you. And as we've got 6 of you, I think it's probably good to move on to that now. So I'm going to ask each of you, I think I'll probably just go in the order that you did the presentations earlier, to get your views on what's one thing that you'd like to see from COP or the UK government, or any government around the world, to support climate action this year. So I'll come to you first, Jack.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I'm going to sort of cheat a little bit actually, and just build a little bit on the last question as well, and just say, that kind of I think it's a bit of a generalization, but that our generation is a bit kind of 0-100, you know, everything's kind of live or die, and actually, you know, you have to kind of accept that there's weaknesses and strengths in all energy technology. And I really want to see kind of, you know, that the energy industry really coming together and just recognizing that, you know, there are strengths and weaknesses across all technologies, and to have a balanced energy mix. Each country is obviously going to capitalize on its own natural resources. You know, that might be hydro perhaps in somewhere like Norway, and wind in the UK, but you know, we all need a sensible energy mix that kind of you know, balances a grid. And I just want governments to then start seeing that that energy industry kind of pulling together to really support the government make decisions. You know, we want bold decision making from governments. We want bold kind of statements and funding initiatives. And as we talked, just highlighted there, you know, access to finance being a key area. That's something that government has the sort of purse strings on a lot of the time. So yeah, that's something I'd like to see, the energy industry really helping government make bold decisions.
And I'll come to you next, Richard.
I'm going to go a bit left field with mine. So I'd like to see, as a ratcheting at COP, not any specific targets, but just for like the current targets to be met. And I think it'd be important, it'd be great if the heads of government across the world had a bit of skin in the game. So I'm picturing Boris Johnson here. If he does like fulfill whatever targets he's got for 2025, I think as a country, we should allow him to build a statue in a central place in London with him on it and a huge sign saying, "I'm a success." But if he fails, I think he deserves a statue that we get to decide what design the statue is. And crucially at the bottom, we'd say, "I am a failure." And you'd have this for all government leaders. And it just means that they've got skin in the game. When they make these promises, they know that if they succeed on those promises, they'll forever be remembered. But if they don't succeed, well, they'll still be remembered, but not for the reasons they want.
Yeah, interesting. It's a good way to sort of hold people to the headlines that they, you know, like to put their name against. So yeah, if you send around a petition to get that in, Richard, I'm sure we'll all sign it.
Be entertaining for sure.
So up next, Sinead.
I think for me, it's about, in summary, no villainization. So talking about it from a UK perspective, I've seen kind of the CCC issue, you know, statements villainizing different types of solutions, i.e. not using kind of international offsets to meet carbon targets, or, you know, X technology not being sufficient. And I think we're now in a situation where there's a role for every kind of mechanism and every kind of solution. And as Kiddo was saying, Article 6 is really important, because as much as people think carbon offsets is whitewashing, it's really about climate finance. And as I think most of us have mentioned, transferring the funds to the right places so we can kind of better the situation holistically. So that's the key thing that I really hope our governments and leaders will kind of change in their narrative at COP.
Great, thank you. And Catherine.
Yeah, so I think not quite as bold as Richard, but on a similar kind of vein, I would like to see something that's actionable in the next couple of years. I think it's very easy to set a net zero target for 2050, and it's great we've got that ambition, but the action needs to happen now. And if we don't have this as a decade of delivery, we're not going to have the 2040s to fix these problems. So I think if the governments can come together and say, in the next few years, we're going to do X, provides leaders with that accountability in the 4 or 5 year election cycle we used to, then that would be a really valuable outcome from COP.
Right, and then Neil.
Yeah, so from a kind of nuclear perspective, I kind of wish that would wish that the UK government and politicians in general would stop being so hesitant and nervous, or perhaps even ashamed to support nuclear. That being said, obviously in a democratic system, things come from the bottom up as well. So there is the piece that we need to, you know, spread public awareness and understanding, which then would lead to, you know, more systematic change. But ultimately, what I'd say is we're not asking for much. You know, we're just asking, and on behalf of nuclear, we're just asking for a level playing field, really. And ultimately, we're looking for a kind of framework in terms of policy and access to finance, similar to what Jack was referring to, where all clean energy technologies can thrive. You know, gone are the days where it's us versus them across any energy technology. we're all of us here, I think, are aware that we need everything clean in order to meet our net zero targets. So I guess I just finish on saying that maybe it's easier said than done, but ideally we'd want our government and our policymakers and the public as well to kind of follow scientific, multinational consensus now, and avoid, being driven by ideological perspectives. Maybe that's too much to ask, I don't know.
Sounds reasonable to me. And then finally, Kilo.
Yeah, okay. I think I will just touch on what I said earlier, and that's finance. One thing I think I want to see what leaders, or UK government come out as, one good outcome is not just, pledges. I think we've had a lot of pledges. We've had countries come up with pledges, but we now need countries to commit to action. And one area that we want to see action is the pledge on climate finance. We agreed to put $100 billion a year in climate finance, to help developing countries, adapt and mitigate and try to transition. And we need to see that happen. That has not been happening. It has just been promises. We need to see commitment in that climate finance. Personally, as someone who is living in the front line of climate change, I've seen this firsthand. I know that developing countries cannot transition to net zero. They need technology transfer. They need, capacity building. They need finance. And world leaders and honest one countries and initial countries should commit to the agreement, to provide, $100 billion in climate finance. I know this has been talked about over the years, but we've just seen pledges. We've seen, looking at our path to transition into net zero by 2050. Yes, we've seen countries come up with pledges. We've seen countries come up with pledges. But yeah, I think the time for pledges have gone. We have 2015 and when the Paris Climate Agreement was signed to make the pledges. But this is the decade of action. As someone mentioned at the call, from this to 2030, we need to see this is the decade of action. This is the decade where we have to set, the tune. We have to decide. If we lose this decade, I don't know how we are going to be able to get it right, by 2050. So this is the decade, and to be able to commit to meet some of the pledges that, looking at, if you look at most of the developing countries, look at their NDCs, have submitted an updated NDC. Their NDC is largely dependent on climate finance, and what leaders must have to commit to providing, the finance to, and technology transfer, knowledge transfer to help these, developing countries to transition to net zero.
Great. Thanks very much, everyone. I think that's a really great way to end our event this evening. And thank you for everyone who joined as well. I think we've shared a lot of the details that you need to get involved with the initiatives that we've mentioned, but we're also, feel free to get in touch with YGN via the email address linked to this event if you have any other questions or wanted to share any more materials. So I think we'll close it there. So thanks very much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Thanks.